Hello, we are Emilio, Chia, and Elisabet Agulló, and we are going to present an analysis on true scholarly sources about Joseph Conrad's novella, The Heart of Darkness, written in 1899. The first article is Heart of Darkness, Anti-Imperialism, Racism, or Impressionism by Patrick Bradlinger, which questions if Conrad condemns or reinforces colonial ideologies. The second article is Raymond Breback's Conrad in Context, Heart of Darkness and The Man Who Would Be King, which offers a comparison between The Heart of Darkness and The Man Who Would Be King by Rudyard Kipling, analyzing the imperial narratives and their cultural context.
In the article "Heart of Darkness and the Man Who Would Be King" by Raymond Breback, the author highlights that although the works previously mentioned are perhaps the two best-known treatments of the 19th-century imperial adventure, surprisingly, nothing has been written about the two stories together. He focuses on three main ideas: the exploration of the loss of morality and dehumanization through obsession for power, the fragility of imperialism when it is degraded from its position of superiority, and the exposure of the civilizing mission as an excuse for exploitation and control. Firstly, he starts the comparison by classifying Kipling's story as a serio-comic adventure story and Conrad's one as a brooding meditation on the nature and omnipresence of evil. However, at the beginning of the article, Breback starts to find similarities between the two stories. He mentions that both stories share a remarkably your story with a privileged listener with whom the teller feels some exceptional bond. In addition, he highlights that the narrators are followers of the main characters. In both stories, the main characters are accepted as gods by the people of these unknown lands. Nonetheless, both stories end with the deaths of the two main characters and with the two narrators remaining alive, carrying the blame and moral consequences of imperialism in their minds. It is important to bear in mind this quote from Breback's article. As his successes mount, he takes himself more and more seriously and becomes increasingly unbalanced. He dies. Breback emphasizes the idea that these stories show how colonialism is a reciprocal process of deconstruction, killing not only colonized people but also leading to a psychological and moral collapse of the colonizers themselves. In Kipling's and Conrad's stories, imperialism is not merely an external domination, but also an internal unraveling of humanity. Secondly, it is important to focus on Breback's analysis of both authors' visions of imperialism and the differences in how Kipling and Conrad approach imperialism. He argues that Kipling's story shows imperialism when it is disposed of all colonizers' justifications, and he adds that the contract is a parody of the colonial life that they try to avoid. However, he argues that the comical tone Kipling uses does not put the lens on the moral consequences of imperialism. Breback explains that Kipling focuses on mocking the arrogant and unwise behavior of the characters, instead of offering a serious critique. He notes that Dravot's death is absurd. He is beaten by his terrified bride to be, and made to bleed. Gods don't bleed, revealing the foolishness of his like delusion. Kipling presents their actions as absurd and even humorous, highlighting their foolishness rather than examining the darker effects of colonial ambition on the human mind. On the contrary, Breback argues that in Heart of Darkness, Marlowe is morally entangled in Kurt's collapse. He defends that Conrad makes an internal criticism of imperialism and a deep reflection of the moral and civic consequences it entails. The quote, Conrad casts Marlowe as an unwilling and trapped disciple, but makes sure that Marlowe feels implicated by Kurt's fall, directly shows that Marlowe is not just an observer, he is morally affected by Kurt's descent. This supports the idea of moral destruction in imperial corruption during the process of colonization. In the last part of the article, Breback talks about Conrad's opinion of Kipling's work. He says that Conrad viewed Kipling's work with a mix of respect and criticism, as he greatly respected his technical skill. Nevertheless, he considered that his moral vision of imperialism was not absolutely well positioned, as it was influenced by the time and place in which Kipling lived. Rebach says that Conrad transformed colonizer adventurous stories into stories that go far beyond the adventurous narrative of imperialism and explore ethics, personal failure, and moral ambiguity. As a conclusion, Breivach's article highlights similarities and differences between Conrad's Heart of Darkness and Kipling's The Men Who Will Be King, exposing the different perspectives and psychological views that can be approached to imperialism.
Radlinger's article discusses that The Heart of Darkness criticizes European imperialism. However, it uses racist views that were common at the time, which makes it a controversial work in postcolonial studies. The article is divided in four sections, and it starts stating that in 1975, Ahibi claimed that The Heart of Darkness should not be taught in schools, as he considered it to be a very racist novel, as, according to him, it opposed Africa and Europe, portraying and reinforcing negative stereotypes of the African community. In the article, Bradlinger acknowledges the existence of these racist components, as seen in the following statement. They were nothing earthly now, nothing but black shadows of disease and starvation, lying confusedly in the greenish gloom, in which they are dehumanized by being referred to as shadows. Moreover, the fact that African characters hardly speak, and when they do so, they speak with broken English, provides a stereotype in which the African community is represented as primitive and uncultured, in opposition to Europeans, who represent civilization. Despite that, other scholars, such as Cedric Watts, argue that the novella is still anti imperialistic, as he claims the use of racist language only reflects the norms of Conrad's time. Moreover, in the second part of the article, Bradlinger explores Conrad's personal connection to the Congo reform movement, which he documented in his Congo diary. This personal implication suggests that Conrad was deeply concerned about the effects of imperialism, which indicates that the novel may stand against it. However, the article also considers Paris' view, which claims that to subvert the imperialistic system, Conrad used white and black dichotomies, which can be considered racist. Despite this, Bradlinger remarks that, even though Conrad's words could not be regarded as racist, this use of the dichotomies would be done on purpose, to use it as a focal point in a complex web of contradictory political and moral values. In the third section, Bradlinger argues that the novella's language raises questions about whether it reinforces imperialistic ideas or condemns them. The novella is deliberately ambiguous, using metaphors and impressionistic language to hide the story's meaning and values. This writing style reminds of heroic imperialistic propaganda, which has been criticized on various occasions. However, this was done to mock the stereotypical mass culture writing patterns, offering an iconic view of the imperialist adventurous genre. What is more, in the last section, Bradlinger suggests that The Heart of Darkness exposes the real horrors that European imperialism caused in the Congo. Altogether, it claims that Kurz embodies many brutal colonizers, hence, it is a realistic representation. Despite that, some critics, such as Lionel Trilling, claim that Kurtz is portrayed as a spiritual hero. Nevertheless, Kurtz is a representation that shows how power and idealism easily turn into violence and imperialistic oppression. Throughout the novella, white voices dominate the narrative, meanwhile Africans remain silenced, showcasing that the book is trapped in the system that it attempts to expose. For this reason, the ending is unclear and confusing, conveying that language may be too weak to express the full reality of the horror. Overall, The Heart of Darkness critiques colonial hierarchies by exposing them using racist stereotypes through an impressionistic style that censors African voices.
In conclusion, both Raymond Brevac's and Patrick Bradlinger's analysis of Heart of Darkness revealed the complexity between imperialism criticism and the contradictions within colonial literature. Brevac highlights the different tones in which both authors approach imperialism, exposing the different perspectives in which imperialism can be approached. Meanwhile, Baldinger focuses on the ambivalent plot of Heart of Darkness, which critiques and is immersed in the imperialist ideologies it critiques. Having said that, both narratives illustrate the reality of colonization which can be perpetuated even when it is criticized or attacked, showing the complexities and incongruities of imperialism.